Outdated processes and systems waste valuable billable hours. LawPay's trusted industry-leading payment features get you paid 39% faster and 33% more. Maximize efficiency and profitability with payment features like automated billing, flexible payment options, and next-day payments. Do more of what you're meant to do with a partner committed to your greatness. Learn more by visiting lawpay.com/DCBar. Ready to move beyond task-based lawyering and focus on strategic success? Transform your legal practice with MyCase, the all-in-one solution that streamlines case management and financial operations. Empower your firm with comprehensive control over cases, clients, and cash flow, and drive success with a platform built on decades of legal expertise. See why 18,000 legal professionals trust MyCase to automate tedious and time-consuming tasks so they can focus on what matters most, delivering outstanding outcomes for their clients. Try MyCase free today at mycase.com/DCBar.
Welcome to Brief Encounters. Hello and welcome to Intersections, Energy and Environmental Issues in Law and Tech, a podcast sponsored by the DC Bar and the Women's Bar Association of DC. I'm Kathryn Caballero with the DC Bar Energy, Environmental, and Natural Resources Community and co-chair of the WBA Energy, Environmental, and Science Law Forum.
And I'm Cathy Pagano of the board of the Women's Bar Association of DC. Today, our guest is Nichole Saunders, Director and Senior Attorney, Energy Transition at the Environmental Defense Fund, or EDF. We're excited to share the story of how this exceptional lawyer is engaging with emerging clean energy programs, like the $7 billion Regional Clean Hydrogen Hubs program, or H2 Hubs. She'll help us learn a little more about hydrogen itself and the opportunities and risks these and other hubs present on the policy and environmental front over the coming years. We're thrilled that Nichole can join us today to share how she and her colleagues at EDF are working on these crucial efforts to advance solutions that fight climate change. As a director and senior attorney in EDF's Energy Transition Program, Nichole leads EDF's portfolio of work on policies to ensure environmental integrity in emerging carbon capture and sequestration projects, and on EDF's Industrial Hub Initiative, Better Hubs, concentrating in the near term on responsible deployment of hydrogen hubs. Nichole guides EDF's strategic science-based advocacy in this arena and manages pertinent multi-stakeholder efforts to ensure positive environmental outcomes by improving industrial practices and enhancing state and federal policies. She's been with EDF since 2013 in Austin, Texas, focusing on a variety of oil and gas and energy transition issues, both domestically and internationally. Nichole received her Bachelor in Science and Master's in Science in Environmental Biology from Tulane University and her JD with highest honors from the University of Tulsa College of Law with a certificate in Sustainable Energy and Resources Law. Of particular interest to this audience, Nichole was editor-in-chief of the Energy Law Journal in partnership with the Federal Energy Bar Association and a student executive editor of the ABA's Year in Review for the section on Environment, Energy, and Resource Law. Today, we'll ask Nichole about her role at EDF and her work on emerging issues like the hubs. We'll also ask Nichole to share about her career path and how she reached this fascinating position. And just so you know, Nichole's remarks and those of our two moderators are made solely in a personal capacity and do not represent the views of their organizations or of the federal government. Welcome, Nichole.
Thank you, Cathy and Kathryn. It's a real pleasure to speak with you both today.
Nichole, you're providing guidance and counsel on several key EDF energy transition efforts. Could you please explain what you mean by energy transition and why doing it right is so crucial?
Sure, that's a really great question to kick us off. Energy transition at its core is really about all the pieces that need to come together to advance the globe towards a clean energy future. We need to do that both swiftly and affordably. So avoiding the worst impacts of climate change will require really dramatically cutting greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels and other sources, and also ensuring that our proposed alternatives are safe, meaningful solutions for both people and the planet. How we get there is, quote, the energy transition broadly, and it will involve our collective best efforts across technology, science, markets, policy, law, and more. It's really an exciting time, I think, in energy policy and super dynamic.
Let's start by sharing with our audience a little more about the Department of Energy's Clean Hydrogen Hubs. What exactly is this $7 billion program, Nichole?
The bipartisan infrastructure law set aside $8 billion for a clean hydrogen hub program. And this first $7 billion that we're talking about is intended to establish a set of regional clean hydrogen hubs across the country. The idea is that the hubs, using DOE's words, would effectively form the foundation of a national clean hydrogen network. So these are pretty massive projects, bringing together businesses and stakeholders from across the hydrogen value chain. So from production to end use and everything in between. And they're bringing them together into one collaborative project. So right now, after a pretty lengthy application and review process, DOE has announced the selection of 7 hubs, and they are in the process as we speak of finalizing the award contracts with each of them. I believe as of this podcast, about 3 have been formally finalized, and we're waiting on those last 4. So once finalized, those hubs will move into phase 1 of a decade plus long multi-phase effort, beginning first with starting to develop some more solidified planning, development, and design. And that includes, importantly, substantive efforts on community benefits and engagement, labor partnerships, workforce training. It's going to be a really interesting program to watch develop over the coming years.
Wow, this sounds like a big step forward for the U.S.'s own energy transition.
That's definitely the hope. Though, while we have some big aspirations for hydrogen and the hydrogen hubs, there remains real work to be done in developing the technology, best practices, regulatory programs that ensure hydrogen lives up to this promise or this potential, or as many say, hydrogen hype, right? So, one potential challenge EDF is working to raise awareness on is the climate impact of hydrogen itself if it's released to the atmosphere through leaks or emissions. So, hydrogen is a tiny, really slippery molecule. It can leak super easily. And if that happens, it can actually have pretty powerful near term warming effects that have previously been relatively underestimated. So that means that if hydrogen emissions themselves aren't carefully managed across that full value chain, the climate benefit of this new fuel could be meaningfully diminished as compared to alternatives that might be available. So we're going to need new tools, new best practices to tackle that challenge. And the hydrogen hubs themselves present an opportunity to pilot and demonstrate solutions over their multi-year tenure to prove up how hydrogen can work in this system. For example, we know the hubs are beginning to enter that phase 1 I mentioned. That will involve a broad swath of really focused effort, including deeper community engagement. At EDF, we're really hoping the hubs also use this phase to proactively consider how they plan to prevent, monitor, and mitigate hydrogen leakage.
Well, Nichole, as we are currently experiencing climate change impacts, your work in this area is invaluable. To give us a better idea of your daily work, can you tell us more about how EDF, the Environmental Defense Fund, is tackling its side of the challenge?
Absolutely. Hydrogen may be a critical path to the fuels and feedstocks we need to decarbonize the energy system, but only if we produce it cleanly and use it smartly. And so, what we're doing at EDF is to do what we can to help ensure that actually happens on the ground. The details are going to matter. For example, using green hydrogen, which is hydrogen made using renewable energy and electrolysis with water, for road transportation or home heating requires far more energy demand than simply directly electrifying. Research also shows that producing blue hydrogen, which is hydrogen made with natural gas and carbon capture, can end up worse for the climate than fossil fuels in the near term if hydrogen and methane leakage is high. So EDF scientists, economists, policy experts are working to shed more light on these challenges to ensure that as we invest in multi-billion-dollar projects like the hubs, we're building up the infrastructure and deployment options that use hydrogen in the smartest ways possible. We're also working to help provide solutions to some of these challenges that we're raising, like teaming up with experts to develop and test advanced measurement tools that can help detect smaller hydrogen leaks quickly in the field, which can have a significant impact to ensuring that we're managing those climate impacts I talked about earlier.
This sounds like very important work, Nichole, pointing out potential issues so they can be tackled and managed right at the outset. We know you've talked about some of the risks of hydrogen if not managed correctly. What are you looking at about the Hubs program that excites you?
Thanks, Cathy. What's really compelling and exciting to me about the hydrogen hubs is the prospect of removing the silos from industrial planning of the past and instead taking a more comprehensive, big picture approach. So I'm hopeful that will allow these projects to really show innovative advancements on a range of issues, from how they manage resources and conduct more collaborative long-term planning, to the depth and transparency they can and should bring to their engagement and partnership with local communities. So instead of each entity individually doing their planning, behind their own closed doors, this is bringing them together to think about these challenges collectively. And what's also important and fascinating to know is that the US is not alone in investing in this idea of industrial hubs. So across the globe, billions of government and private sector funds are investing in hubs, sometimes called clusters or networks, whatever the chosen label, that are designed to group clean energy infrastructure in a way that enhances outcomes both for climate and economies and government objectives around climate, for example, as well. So it's a new way to think about industrial planning and design, something we haven't notoriously done in an environmentally conscious and community-centered way. So the question becomes, can the hub concept allow us to set a new higher bar for cleaner industrial innovation? Implemented wisely, they can. Implemented poorly, hubs could both fail to meet climate aspirations and repeat or even compound the equity failures of the past. So we need to work to ensure that does not occur.
This is so interesting, Nichole. It sounds like we're at the beginning of a period of time that could pave the way in what development looks like in the hydrogen space and beyond, and not just in the United States, but internationally. Do you have any example of what needs to change to meet this higher bar?
Of course I do, Kathryn. Together with my colleagues at EDF, we've been asking ourselves that precise question. What does it look like to do this better, to set this higher bar? So we brought together a group of experts from across our organization who work on everything from science, policy, technology, economics for various components that touch an industrial hub. So that it might include climate emissions, public health impacts, cleaner ports and vehicles, and everything in between. And we talked collectively around this question and landed on a really high level set of what we call core objectives that we think projects should aim to meet to basically do it better than before. We called it Better Hubs. And the objectives address issues like climate pollution, environmental impacts, responsible siting and resource consumption, safely managing carbon, rigorous community engagement and partnership, fostering diverse local economic development, advancing regulatory frameworks, leaning in on transparency and information sharing, safe transportation and storage, and demonstrated value and necessity as a clean energy solution.
This is great. Can you give us an example of one of the objectives, Nichole?
Sure. Some hub projects, for example, will involve capturing and managing carbon emissions. So, where carbon capture or removal is involved, our objective in Better Hubs states that hubs need to have demonstrated plans and capabilities for safe and effective carbon management, transportation, and sequestration. This is one of my key areas of focus at EDF, actually. So I could probably talk about carbon management for longer than we have today. But to keep it high level, where that process or carbon management is involved, we think these activities need to have environmental integrity, be economically justified, and meaningfully address community considerations. Getting to that point is a substantive area of policy and regulatory development across the country as we speak. On our Better Hubs platform, we highlighted a few targeted outcomes, like ensuring carbon capture equipment is designed for really high efficiency and capture rates, or that geologic storage projects are designed and regulated to ensure no groundwater contamination, no leakage, no significant earthquake risks. So I'll flag here at the end with the shameless plug that if you're interested and really want to dig into this or our other core objectives, I'd encourage you to check out our Better Hubs project. It's at betterhubs.edf.org. And there we outline and break down all 10 core objectives in detail, including a variety of targeted outcomes and useful EDF resources on those topics.
I've spent some time on the Better Hubs website, and it's a very impressive information set. I'm going to look at it more closely from the perspective that you've just identified.
Thanks, Kathryn.
Me too. Before we run out of time, Nichole, would you mind sticking around and talking with us some more about your career?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Nichole. And it's clear from what you've shared with us that you're passionate about your work and you have a fascinating portfolio. How did you get into this practice? And do you have any advice for those entering this field?
Sure. Cathy helped give my background a little bit there at the beginning, but really, I had no intention whatsoever of going into the practice of law when I was younger, or even when I was in my early college days. So I went to school in New Orleans, Louisiana at Tulane. And just prior to the beginning of my freshman year was Hurricane Katrina. And at the end of my master's year was the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So my early college academic career was really bookended by these significant both public health, community, economic, and environmental disasters. And I was really heavily influenced by both what we were learning in the science around the various impacts of energy development and energy deployment on our ecosystems and environment and public health, for example, in the wetlands in New Orleans, and also beginning to learn more about the impacts that policy have on that front. So I had a really great mentor when I was in New Orleans working for a nonprofit there who encouraged me to seek out a law degree and learn more about oil and gas law, more about energy law, and make sure that I was really informed on these topics. And I've been really lucky, I think, over the course of my career to land in a variety of positions that have allowed me to, really use both hats. So to take science and translate it into these energy and environmental policy dialogues. And I say that for me is that won't necessarily be everyone else's experience, but what I find most exciting about what I do in this field is that I'm genuinely at my core very interested in the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of why that's the answer and what makes that the answer from a scientific perspective versus an economic perspective, and how do we reach conclusions that work for everyone. So what I would recommend is focus on what you want to achieve personally and how you personally best perform. Like, what is your niche that you can lean in on? What are you really good at it? And what makes you excited to do? And just keep pursuing that in different careers. Do you like the courtroom? Do you prefer to write? Do you want to do research? Do you like public engagement and public speaking? Do you want to mediate and work with the diverse stakeholders? There's a job for all of those positions and everything in between. So really just keep learning, take the imperfect job at the beginning if you need to, and learn what you can, and you'll always see how you can apply it to something new and different next.
That's fabulous advice, Nichole. And we suspect you spent a lot of time mentoring students or working with interns. What do you get asked most often?
Oh, that's a good one. The number one thing people typically ask me actually is, what actually is your job? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? NGO jobs are not at all the same, even for attorneys. Sometimes even a job description doesn't give an applicant a real sense of what it looks like to wake up and do this job every day in and out, 5 days a week. And some NGO positions are really narrowly focused on certain topics or certain regions, certain local organizational objectives. And some are more broad. Like me, for example, I pay attention on the issues that I work globally, while some of my colleagues maybe work a very specific issue in a certain region or a specific place or state. Some are very traditional law heavy jobs, others are much more policy and advocacy. And how each different NGO or organization goes about seeking change is often quite different. So it's important when you're seeking out jobs, especially in an NGO context, to not only read the job description and know how you fit the desires of that job, but really dig into what you can learn about that organization broadly and its general philosophy and approach, because that impacts your day-to-day life. You're aligning yourself with this organization and its approach. For example, I was drawn to EDF in particular because of its heavy focus on science and how that applies to policy. And then another thing I think is fun to point out to folks is that I work with a very different client. My client technically is the globe, the earth, the climate. And that is a different way of thinking about the law and thinking about how I track my hours and how I work towards positive outcomes and objectives. Thinking about not always how to apply the law, but what should the law be? What should the law say? And that was one of the most exciting questions, I think, my first day with my boss over a decade ago. He asked me, yeah, I know what the law says, but I'm asking you, what should it say to reach a better environmental outcome? And that just really kickstarted a really fascinating job. So for me, every day is about, what should the regulations say? What should the best practices be? What do we know about the technology, the solutions, and how do we translate that? So I've published peer review papers. I've spoken at a lot of conferences. I work on memos and strategy, draft legislation, regulations. So it's kind of all over the place, and it's an exciting experience every day. It's constantly changing.
Nichole, at the best of times, law can be stressful, and you sound like you are quite busy in your portfolio, plus very passionate about it, which also can be quite stressful when you work towards a particular outcome. Tell us a little bit about how you maintain work-life balance or work-life harmony in your career.
I wish that I had a really solid, beautiful answer solution for this. We all wish we found one. I have two very young children, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And the reality is that we all sometimes just have chaotic seasons of life, right? And so how we define balance can be variable. I'm first and foremost really lucky to work for an organization that, while being very fast paced, also highly values the importance of balance and well-being, and allows for a lot of flexibility and independence in how we get our work done. So that's really core to me in terms of having that foundational support from the organization that I work for. And personally, I think the most helpful thing I've learned and continue to relearn and relearn over time is to establish boundaries on when I'm engaged, especially with my inbox. It seems easy conceptually, people talk about it all the time, but it's really hard when it's right at our fingertips 24/7. And especially in my case, I work from home now. My office is my home and my entire desk is here. So it took me a long time to really learn that I needed to draw a more distinct line on when I left work for the day, both for my family and for my brain. In this industry, the work is always there. It will still be there when I'm ready to pick it back up again in 3 hours. And it was okay that the email came in and I didn't immediately respond to it at 5 a.m. or 9 p.m. I mean, obviously, there are fire drills that we need to stay engaged on at all times in most of our careers. But sometimes it's okay, and that can be respected too. So for me, that translates into a few hours early evening and weekend blocks that I devote fully to my family and try to set my phone down. I'm no means perfect at keeping this boundary, or any of us really perfect at keeping stop working boundaries, but it's something I continue to strive for myself.
That is so helpful, Nichole. Are there any other lessons that you would like to share to help and mentor others in their career paths?
I guess the main thing I'd want to share for this audience is that there are a lot of ways to use an energy law degree, an environmental law degree, or a law degree broadly to work on issues that impact public health, the environment, energy transition, climate. I think people are seeing that more now than ever, even since I was in school. And there are so many ways that a legal education can serve to help you excel in a career path that you're really passionate about. So I think that leans back on balance and leans back on finding a job about your passion, is keeping an open mind as you seek out internships, externships, mentors, and learn as much as you can about different pathways towards the end objective that you're really excited about pursuing, and working towards finding a job that really fulfills those parts of your brain that work and keep you moving day to day. There's lots of options, I guess, is what I would say, and keep an open mind and never feel like you're locked in one place. This career allows you to move at whim and pursue your passion.
Nichole, thank you. We really appreciate your time with us today, not only sharing these fascinating developments in the clean energy transition, but your wise counsel and your valuable time. And so we're very appreciative of that. We want to thank you, the DC Bar, the Women's Bar Association, and our listeners. And we invite you all to watch for our next Intersections podcast. Thank you so much.
This episode of Brief Encounters was brought to you in part by our sponsors, LawPay and MyCase. To learn more about how these solutions can work for you, check out the description of this episode.